Dust rolled across the broken colony road, carried by the dry wind that scraped over ruins and shattered homes. The air smelled of smoke, of burnt metal and old fire. A woman walked slowly, her feet bare and bleeding, her arms weak from carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside the bundle was her child, thin as bones, lips cracked, eyes half closed. For 3 days she had not eaten, and her child had not tasted more than a sip of dirty water. She could hear his shallow breathing and the way his tiny chest rose with effort. Her legs trembled, yet she kept walking. Hunger clawed her belly like a wild beast, but her worse. Every step was heavy, every heartbeat a battle. Ahead of her, through the drifting dust, she saw movement, figures in armor, humans. She froze. Her own people had told her humans were dangerous, that they killed without pity, but she had seen humans fight too. They defended their camps. They shared food among themselves. They did not abandon their wounded. In her own village, when she begged for help, they turned away. They told her she was weak, that if her child could not live on his own, then he did not deserve to live at all. They threw stones at her until she fled into the wastes. She had walked since then, 3 endless days, guided by only the faint smoke trail she had seen in the sky. Now she stood just outside the broken wall of a human outpost, her body shaking, her child's faint whimper almost lost in the wind. One of the soldiers noticed her first. His rifle lifted, his voice sharp. "Contact!" Others rushed to the wall, weapons raised, eyes hard with suspicion. She almost turned and ran, but her legs gave way. She dropped to her knees in the dust, her arms trembling as she lowered her child before them. The cloth slipped, and they saw the boy's hollow face, his skin pale, his ribs showing. She lifted her hands in surrender, her voice breaking like dry twigs. "Please," she whispered, though her throat burned from thirst. She coughed, swallowed hard, and forced the words again, louder this time, each one like a knife in her chest. "Please, may I have the leftovers for my child?" The soldiers froze. The wind whistled through the broken wall. None of them spoke. They had seen beggars before, had seen the desperate faces of war, but there was something in her voice, something raw that cut deeper than any enemy blade. She pressed her forehead to the dirt, her body trembling, and whispered again, 3 days. He has not eaten." Her tears left dark spots in the dust. One soldier, taller than the rest, with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. His hand went to his pack. The commander barked, "Hold! We don't know if it's a trick. Could be bait." The soldier hesitated, but his eyes did not leave the boy's face. The child's lips were blue. His tiny hand twitched weakly, reaching out, though it had no strength. The soldier knelt slowly, placing his rifle aside. From his pack, he pulled half a piece of ration bread. It was hard, dry, barely enough for even one bite, but to the boy it looked like a mountain of food. The mother lifted her head, her eyes wide, filled with both fear and hope. The soldier broke the bread into small crumbs, pressed a piece gently to the child's lips. At first the boy did not react, too weak, but then his mouth opened, and he chewed slowly. His throat moved, forcing it down. His tiny eyes flickered open for the first time in hours. The soldier gave another small piece, then another, watching as life returned to the boy's face in small sparks. The mother's body shook with silent sobs. She whispered something in her own language, words of blessing or thanks. No one understood. Around them, the other soldiers kept their weapons ready, eyes scanning the ruins. Suspicion still hung heavy. The commander muttered, "We don't have enough for ourselves. If we feed one, more will come. We can't keep them all." But even as he said it, his voice was weaker, less certain. The sight of the child gnawing on crumbs while clutching the soldier's sleeve with tiny fingers was not something easy to look away from. The woman lowered her head again. "I will work. I will clean. I will carry. Only let him live. Please." Her voice cracked into silence. She swayed as if she might fall, her arms limp. The soldier caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, as if her bones were hollow. He lifted her gently and looked at his commander. "She's no spy. She's starving." The commander's jaw tightened. He looked at the boy, at the woman, then at the circle of soldiers waiting for his order. Finally, he turned his face away. "Bring them inside," he said. "But this is on you." The soldier carried the mother in his arms, while the boy clung to his sleeve with surprising strength. They moved past the broken wall, into the outpost, where the dim light of burning lamps cast long shadows. For the first time in days, the woman felt warmth. For the first time in his life, the boy felt safe arms holding him. Neither knew what would come next, but in that moment, the desperate plea had been answered, and something had changed in the hearts of the humans who watched. The soldier laid the mother on a thin cot in the corner of the human outpost. Her body was frail, her skin pale, and her breath shallow, but she was alive. The child, still weak, sat close to her side, his small hand resting on her torn clothes. A blanket was wrapped around him, far too big for his tiny frame, but it gave him warmth. The soldier, who had shared his bread, crouched near them, his eyes never leaving the boy. He had seen many wounded men in battles, many broken bodies on fields, but the quiet desperation of this child shook him more than war ever had. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp that flickered whenever the wind pushed through the cracks of the ruined walls. Other soldiers stood nearby, watching with unease. One muttered, "We don't have food for ourselves. If we keep her and the boy, that's 2 more mouths. We can't afford it." Another crossed his arms and said, "She could be lying. Maybe she's not as helpless as she looks. Maybe she leads others here." The suspicion spread like smoke. The commander, standing tall with his hands behind his back, listened without speaking. He studied the woman and the child, his face unreadable. The soldier, who gave food, finally turned to them. His voice was calm but firm. "Look at him. He's no trick. He's just a starving child. Do you think an enemy would let their own son nearly die just to fool us?" His words carried weight, but the camp was restless. Fear of shortage, fear of betrayal, fear of death, all of it pressed down on them. The sound of wind outside seemed like whispers of danger, reminding them that the world beyond their wall was not safe. The child coughed weakly. The sound silenced the room. He opened his eyes, looked around, and then fixed his gaze on the soldier. Slowly, with trembling effort, the boy reached out and gripped the man's sleeve. His fingers were tiny, but they clung with surprising strength, as if holding on to life itself. The soldier froze, his heart pounding. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came. He only held on, refusing to let go. The room grew heavier, the silence stretching long. Even the commander looked away, uncomfortable with what he saw. The mother stirred, whispering in her own tongue, but her voice was too weak to understand. Her eyes opened, dull but filled with gratitude. She looked at the soldier, then at her son, and a faint smile crossed her lips before she slipped back into exhausted sleep. The soldier pulled the blanket higher over her, then sat down beside the boy. He gently placed his hand over the child's, and for the first time that day, the boy's trembling eased. But outside the walls, danger stirred. Scouts had returned with grim news. Alien patrols were moving through the area, searching the ruins, hunting for survivors. It was no secret who they were looking for. The woman's people had cast her out, and now they wanted her back, not to save her, but to make an example of her. She had defied them, had refused their cruel orders, and for that, she was a target. The commander knew it, the soldiers knew it, and soon the enemy would be at their doorstep. The news spread quickly through the camp. Some soldiers muttered angrily, saying the woman's presence would bring death to them all. "We should send her away before it's too late," one said. Another added, "Our duty is to survive, not to play saviors." Fear made their voices sharp, but not everyone agreed. Others argued that sending her and the child into the night was no different than killing them with their own hands. The argument grew, voices rising, hands clenching weapons. The soldier who had given food stood in the middle of it, his voice louder than the rest. "If we send them out, what do we become? What are we fighting for if we can't even protect a child?" His words struck some of the men, but not all. The commander stepped forward, raising his hand to silence them. "Enough," he said. His tone was cold, steady. "We are soldiers, not caretakers." But he paused, looking at the child who was still clutching the soldier's sleeve with quiet determination. "We are also human." The room grew still again. No one spoke. The commander's eyes hardened. "We will not turn them out, but if danger comes because of them, we will all pay the price. Remember that." Night fell heavy and cold. The lamps burned low, shadows dancing on the walls. The soldiers took turns on watch, their eyes scanning the broken streets beyond the gates. Every noise in the distance set their nerves on edge. The woman lay in uneasy sleep, her body trembling even under the blanket. The child stayed awake longer, his small eyes wide in the dim light, as if afraid to close them. The soldier sat nearby, speaking softly, telling stories of stars and skies, even though he was not sure the boy understood. But the boy listened, his eyes following the soldier's face until sleep finally took him. Outside, patrols crept closer. The scouts had not been wrong. In the darkness beyond the ruined walls, faint glimmers of movement appeared. Shapes sliding between broken buildings, whispers of armor against stone. The humans inside did not know how close the danger was, but they felt it in the air. Something was coming. The camp was divided in heart, torn between fear and duty. But in the corner of the room, a starving boy slept with crumbs still clinging to his lips, his tiny hand gripping a soldier's sleeve like a lifeline. And that simple touch weighed heavier than all the arguments of survival, for it reminded them of something they had almost forgotten, that humanity was not just about living, but about protecting life, too fragile to stand on its own. The night was long, filled with the sound of wind and the creak of the old metal walls that surrounded the outpost. The fire in the center of the camp burned low, casting weak light across tired faces. Soldiers sat in small groups, their whispers filled with doubt. Some sharpened their knives, some counted bullets, and some just stared into the flames as if answers might rise from the embers. The rescued woman slept against the wall, her child curled tightly against her, but their presence weighed on everyone's mind. The soldier who had fed the child sat close, his rifle leaning against the wall behind him. His eyes were tired, but he stayed awake, watching over the two. He knew the danger. He knew that by helping them, he had risked more than his life. He had risked the safety of the entire camp. Yet when he looked at the boy's small hand clutching the blanket, he felt no regret. Something inside him told him this was right. Still, he could feel the tension around him, the eyes of his comrades filled with both anger and fear. Voices grew louder. One soldier spat into the dirt and said, "We can't keep them. We barely have food left. She'll drain us dry, and when the patrols find us, we'll all be dead because of her." Another agreed, his voice sharp, "We have orders to hold this outpost, not to play saviors. She's a risk." Others muttered in support, nodding, their faces hard with desperation. But then an older soldier shook his head. His face was lined from years of fighting, his eyes dark but steady. "Listen to yourselves. Are we so far gone that we'll send a mother and child out to die? What makes us any different from the monsters hunting them if we do that?" His words brought silence for a moment, but the fear quickly returned, twisting inside the men like a blade. The commander, silent until now, finally stepped into the circle of firelight. His voice was calm but heavy, the kind of tone that made men listen. "Enough. We will not tear ourselves apart with arguments. We decide now." His eyes moved across the camp, pausing on the soldier who had given food. You brought them in. Tell us why we should keep them. Tell us why their lives are worth risking all of ours." The soldier stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze. He looked down at the boy, whose breathing was soft but steady, then at the mother, whose frail form seemed too weak to rise again. He raised his voice so all could hear. "Because we are not just soldiers. Because if we turn them away, we lose more than food or safety. We lose who we are. Look at him." He pointed to the child. "He called me father with his eyes tonight. Not because he knows me, but because he saw protection. If we send them away, we may live another week. But what kind of life is that when we've killed our own humanity with our fear?" The camp grew still. The flames crackled. Some soldiers lowered their eyes, ashamed, while others clenched their fists, still unconvinced. The woman stirred then, half awake, and spoke in a trembling voice. "You don't understand. They hunt me because I refused them." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "They told me to sell my daughter to their warlord, to make her a bride for his sons. I said no. I ran. They called me traitor." She broke into sobs, covering her face. "I would rather die than see her taken. That is why they want us. That is why they search." Her words cut through the camp like a blade. For a long time, no one spoke. Even the harshest soldiers looked away, shame burning in their eyes. The commander's face tightened, his jaw stiff. He understood now that this was not only about survival. It was about defiance. The woman's story had revealed something. She had chosen dignity over fear, and now she was being punished. The boy, woken by his mother's sobs, crawled closer to the soldier who had fed him. He gripped his sleeve again, looking up with wide, silent eyes. His lips moved, whispering one soft word, almost too quiet to hear. Papa. The sound struck harder than any argument. The soldier froze, his chest tightening. Around the camp, men shifted uncomfortably, some turning away, some swallowing hard. The commander looked at the boy, then at the soldier, and finally at the fire. For a long time, he said nothing. The only sound was the wind outside, carrying with it the faint echo of distant footsteps. Maybe patrols, maybe worse. At last, the commander spoke. His voice was low, but firm. We cannot send them out, not now, not ever. If the enemy wants them, then they will have to come through us. His eyes burned as he looked around at his men. We fight not just for Earth, not just for orders, but for what makes us human. If we forget that, we've already lost the war. The soldiers said nothing, but the decision was made. They knew it would bring danger. They knew it might bring death, but something had shifted in the firelight. A bond had been forged, unspoken, yet stronger than steel. That night, as the mother slept and the child curled safely in the soldier's arms, the camp kept watch with sharper eyes. Fear still lingered, but so did something else, resolve. They knew the enemy was coming, but now they also knew this. When the enemy arrived, they would not only face human guns and blades, they would face human hearts that refused to break. Scouts returned before dawn, their boots heavy with dust and their faces pale from what they had seen. They moved quickly through the outpost gates, their voices urgent as they spoke to the commander. Enemy patrols were everywhere, moving through the ruins like wolves searching for prey. Torches burned in the distance. Strange banners flapped in the night air, and the sound of armored boots echoed across broken streets. The message was clear. The enemy was hunting, and they were closing in. The commander gathered his soldiers near the fire pit, his voice low but firm. They know she is here. It is only a matter of time before they come for her and the boy. We must decide how we face this. His eyes moved over every soldier, but no one spoke. The air was heavy with fear. The mother sat close to the wall, clutching her son tightly against her chest, her eyes wide as if she could already hear the footsteps coming closer. The soldier who had fed them stood tall, his rifle strapped across his back. His voice rang out into the silence. If they want her, they'll have to come through me. The words cut through the fear, sharp and unshakable. Some soldiers shifted uneasily, but others straightened their backs, a fire sparking in their eyes. The commander studied him, saying nothing for a long moment, then gave a single nod. So be it, we will fight. The mother's lips trembled as she looked at the man. Her voice was soft, broken, yet full of something she had not felt in a long time, hope. Why? She whispered. Why would you fight for us? The soldier knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. Because you and your son deserve to live. And because if we let them take you, we lose more than just you. We lose ourselves. The child, barely awake, clung to the soldier's arm again, his small voice whispering the word that had already shaken the hearts of hardened men. Papa. The camp grew still. Even the commander's expression softened, if only for a moment, as he turned away and barked orders to prepare. Weapons were checked, ammunition counted, defenses reinforced. The humans dragged broken metal into barricades, sharpened stakes, and positioned themselves along the walls. Every man and woman in the outpost knew the battle was coming, and none of them knew if they would see another dawn. Yet there was no turning back. The night deepened, cold and heavy. From beyond the ruins came the sound of drums, slow and thunderous, beating like the heart of some dark beast. Torches flickered in the distance, and shadows moved closer. The enemy had arrived. Their voices carried on the wind, cruel and mocking, promising death and pain. Then came the demand, shouted in a language the humans only half understood but could feel in their bones. Give us the woman and the child. Do this, and we will spare you. The commander stood on the wall, his voice strong, unshaken. You will have nothing from us. His words echoed into the night. Silence followed for a heartbeat, then cruel laughter rose from the shadows. The enemy shouted again, this time louder, more threatening. She is ours. Give her up, or you all die. The soldier who had fed her climbed the wall and stood beside the commander. He raised his rifle, his voice like thunder. If you want her, come and take her. His shout rang out across the ruins, bold and defiant. For a moment, even the enemy seemed to hesitate, surprised by such raw courage. Then the drums grew louder, faster, and the night filled with the sound of marching feet. Inside the outpost, fear gripped the soldiers, but so did determination. The mother pressed her face into her son's hair, tears running down her cheeks. No one had ever chosen her before. No one had ever stood between her and death. Now, these strangers, these humans, were preparing to risk everything for her and her child. She whispered to her son, her words breaking. "They fight for us. They fight for you." The enemy torches grew brighter, their voices rising in cruel chants. Shadows swarmed the broken streets, moving closer with every step. The humans tightened their grips on their rifles, their knives, their spears. Hearts pounded like drums in their chests, but no one backed away. They stood as one, a small band of weary soldiers, ready to defy an army. The commander's voice carried above the noise. "Hold the line. Tonight, we fight not for survival alone, but for what makes us human. They think fear will break us. Show them they are wrong." His words lit a fire in tired hearts. The mother raised her head, watching them. She saw men and women who had lost everything, homes, families, futures. Yet they stood ready to give their lives for a stranger and her child. She had been told humans were selfish, violent, dangerous. But here, in this broken outpost, she saw the truth. They were dangerous, yes, but not because they destroyed. They were dangerous because they refused to give up. The enemy drew nearer. The drums pounded like thunder. The ground shook beneath their boots. The boy whimpered softly, burying his face against the soldier's arm, but the soldier only held him tighter. He looked out into the darkness, his jaw clenched, his voice steady as he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Over my dead body." The first arrow flew, whistling through the air, and struck the barricade with a sharp crack. The battle had begun. The outpost walls lit with muzzle flashes, rifles barking into the night, their thunder rolling over the ruins. The humans fought with everything they had, their defiance blazing brighter than the torches that surrounded them. And in the corner of the camp, holding her son close, the mother wept, not from fear, but from something else. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. For the first time, someone had chosen to stand beside her. The sound of battle shook the night, but in her heart, there was light. The humans had made their choice, and it was a choice that would echo far beyond the broken walls of that outpost. The night turned into chaos as the enemy surrounded the outpost from every side. Their torches burned like angry stars. Their chants filled the air with dread. The humans stood firm behind their barricades, but everyone knew they were outnumbered. The commander's eyes scanned the horizon, counting shadows, listening to the growing roar of voices. The enemy did not rush. They wanted the humans to break first, to give in to fear. From the darkness came another voice, louder than the rest. It was cruel and mocking, echoing off the broken walls. "Give us the woman and the child. Do this, and you may live. Refuse, and we will tear down your walls, and every one of you will die screaming." The demand hung in the air like poison. Soldiers shifted nervously, glancing at one another. Fear gnawed at them, whispering that maybe surrender was the only way. The commander said nothing, his jaw tight. He knew his men were tired, their ammunition low, and their rations almost gone. Every choice seemed like a step toward death. Some of the soldiers began to whisper, their voices sharp and desperate. "If we give her up, maybe they'll leave us alone. Maybe we'll survive this." Others shook their heads angrily. "You think they'll keep their word? You think butchers like them show mercy? No. If we hand her over, we're next." The argument spread like fire in dry grass, voices rising, hearts torn between survival and honor. The soldier who had fed the child stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough! Look at yourselves. You call yourselves soldiers, but you would hand over a starving mother and her son just to save your skins? If we do that, we're already dead. Not in body, but in soul." His words silenced the whispers. He turned, pointing at the boy who clung to his sleeve, eyes wide with fear but full of trust. "He believes in us. He believes we will protect him. If we betray that, what are we worth?" The boy's small voice broke the silence, soft but clear enough for all to hear. "Papa?" It was only one word, but it carried weight heavier than the enemy's threat. The men lowered their eyes, ashamed, the fire of doubt dimming. Even the commander's hard face softened for a brief moment before turning to steel again. He raised his hand toward the walls. They want to fight? Then we give them one. The enemy roared outside, growing restless. Their leader shouted again, demanding surrender. The commander climbed the wall and shouted back, his voice echoing like thunder, "You will have nothing from us. Come and see how humans die standing." His defiance sent a ripple through his men. Fear remained, but courage began to rise alongside it. They tightened their grips on their rifles, knives, and makeshift spears. The enemy did not wait any longer. With a roar, they surged forward. Arrows whistled through the air, smashing into barricades. The humans returned fire, rifles cracking like lightning in the night. The battlefield exploded with sound, screams, steel, fire, and thunder. The first wave hit the walls, crashing against the defenses with shields and claws. The humans fought desperately, slashing, shooting, and pushing back with every ounce of strength. Inside the camp, the mother crouched low with her son, shielding him with her own body. She prayed silently, her tears mixing with the dirt on her face. Every shout, every explosion, every scream outside made her heart clench tighter. She had expected to die many times before, but never had anyone stood for her. Now these humans risked everything, and the weight of it crushed her as much as it lifted her. The boy, though frightened, looked up whenever the soldier passed by to reload. Their eyes met, and the boy whispered again, "Papa!" It was not a cry of fear, but of trust, and the soldier carried that word like armor. He fought harder, fiercer, because he knew someone small and fragile was counting on him. The siege dragged on. Wave after wave came, and though the humans held, their strength began to falter. Ammunition thinned. Men fell wounded. The barricades shook under the weight of enemies pushing against them. The commander shouted orders, his voice raw, but even he knew the line could not hold forever. The enemy paused between attacks, their drums echoing in the night. Once again, their leader shouted, his voice dripping with mockery, "Hand them over, and this ends. Why die for them? They are not yours. Give them to us." The commander opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, the soldier stepped onto the wall, his face hard with fury. He raised his rifle high and shouted back, "If you want them, then fight us all. But you will never have them while I draw breath." His words roared across the field like a challenge, burning with defiance. The enemy screamed in rage, their fury redoubled. The drums pounded faster, and the ground trembled with their charge. The humans braced, their hearts pounding, their bodies ready for the storm. The mother wept, clutching her son close, but this time her tears were not only of fear, they were of awe. Never before had anyone spoken such words for her. She whispered to her child, "Do you see, my love? We are not alone, not anymore." The next wave crashed against the outpost like a flood. Blades clashed, rifles fired, men shouted, and blood painted the dirt. But through it all, the humans held. They fought not just for survival, but for something greater, for the promise that no innocent would be abandoned, not while they still stood. The siege had only begun, and no one knew who would survive the night. But in that moment, one thing was certain. The mother and her child were no longer forsaken. They were under the protection of humans, and the enemy would learn that to reach them, they would have to tear through walls of flesh and fire, through men and women who had already chosen their answer. They would rather die than surrender what made them human. The battle raged deep into the night, and the air was filled with smoke and fire. The outpost shook with every impact as the enemy slammed against the barricades again and again. The humans were tired, their arms heavy, their ammunition running low, but they refused to fall back. Every soldier knew they were fighting on the edge of death, yet still they stood. The cries of the wounded mixed with the clash of steel and the roar of rifles, but above it all burned the stubborn fire of defiance. The mother hid with her child inside a corner of the outpost, her arms wrapped around him tightly. She could hear the shouts, the screams, the thunder of battle outside the thin walls. Each sound stabbed her heart like a knife, but she did not cry out. She pressed her lips to her son's hair, whispering to him to stay quiet, to stay brave. Her tears fell silently, not only from fear, but from something she had never felt before. A strange hope that maybe, just maybe, these humans could save them. The soldier who had fed the boy fought at the barricade, his face blackened by smoke, his hands bloody from gripping his rifle and blade. He moved like a man possessed, striking down enemy after enemy, his voice hoarse from shouting orders and warnings. The boy's word, "Papa," still echoed in his mind, driving him forward even when his body begged him to stop. He had fought wars before, but this fight was different. This was not only about holding ground. This was about protecting something pure, something innocent, something that reminded him of why he had ever picked up a weapon in the first place. The enemy did not tire. They came in waves, cruel and merciless. Their war cries filled the night, promising death, taunting the humans to surrender. But the humans answered with steel and fire. Even when their guns ran low, they fought with knives, with fists, with whatever they could find. The commander stood tall on the wall, his voice carrying through the smoke. Hold the line. Every second we hold, we prove to them we will never break. His courage lit a fire in the hearts of those who still stood. But even courage has limits. As dawn's faint light began to touch the horizon, the humans knew they could not last much longer. Their walls were cracked, their supplies almost gone, and too many of their brothers and sisters lay wounded. The commander's face was grim. He knew the end was close. Then, in the middle of the chaos, a horn sounded across the battlefield. It was not the enemy's horn. It was deeper, louder, filled with power. Every head turned to the sky as shadows moved above the smoke. Engines roared, the air trembled, and out of the clouds came the sight the humans had prayed for, but never dared to expect. Reinforcements. Dropships thundered down like falling stars, their metal bodies gleaming in the pale light of dawn. The ground shook as they landed, and within moments, soldiers in fresh armor stormed out, weapons blazing. The enemy froze in shock. For hours they had believed they were crushing a forgotten outpost, that victory was in their hands. Now, before their eyes, the sky itself had delivered humanity's answer. The new troops fought with fury, their rifles spitting fire, their cannons roaring. The enemy's chants turned to cries of panic as their ranks were torn apart. The battlefield shifted in moments. The hunters had become the hunted. Inside the outpost, the mother covered her mouth, her eyes wide as she watched through a crack in the wall. She had seen many battles, but never had she seen anything like this. The humans descended like thunder, relentless and unyielding, their voices filled not with cruelty, but with command, with unity. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. Humanity had come for its own, and in doing so, had come for her too. The soldier stumbled back into the outpost, bloodied but alive, his chest heaving. He fell to one knee, exhausted, but when he looked up, he saw the boy running to him. The child threw his tiny arms around his neck, holding him tightly. The soldier closed his eyes, his arms wrapping around the boy, and for a moment the noise of battle faded. He felt only the warmth of that small body and the trust it carried. Outside, the enemy broke. They could not withstand the storm that had fallen upon them. Their leader shouted in rage, but even his voice could not hold them together. They fled into the ruins, leaving behind their dead and their pride. The battlefield that had once been filled with their chants now echoed only with the sound of human victory. The commander stood tall on the wall, watching as the last of the enemy disappeared into the smoke. His face was hard, but his eyes betrayed relief. He turned to his weary soldiers, raising his hand high. We held, we endured, and we proved that no matter the odds, humanity does not abandon its own. His voice carried across the camp, and cheers rose from tired throats. The mother stepped forward, still holding her son close. She looked at the soldier who had saved them again and again, and her voice shook as she spoke. I thought no one would ever fight for us, but you did. All of you did. You have given me something I thought I lost forever. Hope. Tears rolled down her face, but this time they were not only tears of pain. The boy pressed his cheek against the soldier's chest, whispering again, Papa. The word was soft, almost drowned out by the cheers outside, but the soldier heard it clearly. He held the boy tighter, his throat thick with emotion. For him, the word was more than a name. It was a promise that he would protect them, no matter what came next. The sun rose higher, burning away the smoke, revealing the scars of battle. The outpost was battered, but it stood. The humans were bloodied, but they were alive. And in the midst of ruin, a bond had been forged that was stronger than steel. The enemy had learned that day that humans were not to be broken. They had seen the fury of a people who fought not just with weapons, but with hearts that refused to surrender. For the mother and her child, it was the day their fate changed forever. For the humans, it was proof that even in the darkest of nights, when hope seemed lost, they could rise together and turn despair into victory. Smoke drifted lazily above the ruins as the sun climbed higher, painting the battlefield in pale gold. The outpost still stood, though its walls were cracked and scorched. Bodies lay where they had fallen, both human and enemy, silent reminders of the night's struggle. The humans moved slowly now, some tending to the wounded, others gathering weapons and supplies left behind. Their faces were tired, eyes hollow from lack of sleep, but there was a spark in them that had not been there before. They had survived. More than that, they had won. The mother stepped out of the shelter, holding her child close. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, but she walked with her head a little higher than before. Her eyes scanned the camp, and for the first time in years, she felt safe. The boy tugged at her arm, pointing toward the soldier who had fought for them. He was sitting on a broken crate, his rifle leaning nearby, his hands wrapped in bloody cloth. The boy broke free from his mother's hold and ran to him with small, stumbling steps. The soldier looked up as the child reached him. He was exhausted, every muscle in his body aching, but when the boy climbed into his lap and pressed his tiny arms around his neck, strength returned to him. The child whispered the word that had carried through the long night, the word that bound them together. Papa! The soldier closed his eyes, pulling the boy close, his heart heavy and light all at once. The commander watched from a distance, his arms folded. His face was stern, but there was no anger in his gaze. He had seen too many soldiers fall for nothing, too many battles fought without meaning. But this was different. He stepped forward, his boots crunching over broken stone, and stood before the soldier, the mother, and the child. His voice was steady. We nearly forgot what we're fighting for. Last night reminded us. The mother lowered her head, her voice trembling as she spoke. You saved us when no one else would. My own people abandoned me, but you stood between us and death. She clutched her son tighter, tears filling her eyes. I have no words to repay this. The commander shook his head. You owe us nothing. What matters is that you live and that he lives. He glanced at the boy, who was still clinging to the soldier. That is payment enough. Some of the younger soldiers gathered nearby, listening in silence. They had been afraid, had doubted the decision to keep the strangers, but now they saw what it meant. The child's trust, the mother's gratitude, the bond forged in the darkest night, it was worth more than rations or safety. It was the reason they were still human. The soldier finally spoke, his voice low but firm. We fight wars, we spill blood, but in the end it is moments like this that matter. If we had sent them away, we would have won nothing, even if we had survived. His words carried across the camp, and heads nodded slowly. The boy leaned back in his arms, his small fingers brushing against the soldier's scarred cheek. He smiled faintly, the first true smile he had given since they had met. The soldier felt something stir inside him, something long buried beneath years of war, warmth, the kind that no victory on a battlefield could give. The mother knelt beside them, placing her hand on the soldier's arm. You are not just soldiers. You are more. You are protectors. I will never forget this. Her words were soft, but they struck deep. Around them, men and women who had nearly given up on hope stood a little straighter, as if her gratitude was a gift they had all earned. As the sun rose higher, the dropships that had saved them lifted back into the sky, leaving behind supplies and orders. The war was far from over. More battles waited, more nights of blood and fire. But in this outpost, in this moment, something had changed. They were no longer just survivors holding on to scraps of life. They had remembered their purpose. The commander called for his men, his voice sharp again but steadier than before. We rebuild, we bury our dead, and we prepare because the enemy will come again. But let them come, they will find us ready. The camp stirred into motion, hands working, hearts stronger. The soldier stood, carrying the boy in his arms. The child rested his head on his shoulder, eyes half closed but peaceful. The mother walked beside them, close enough that her hand brushed his arm as they moved. They were not just strangers anymore. They were a family, bound not by blood but by choice, by sacrifice, by the night when humans refused to let fear decide their fate. At the edge of the camp, the soldier paused, looking out at the horizon where smoke still rose in the distance. The war stretched far beyond what his eyes could see, but he felt no despair. He looked down at the boy in his arms and the mother at his side, and he knew why he would keep fighting. The mother whispered to her son, her voice filled with quiet pride. "They fought for us. They gave us life. Remember this always." The boy stirred, his small hand tightening on the soldier's jacket, and whispered one last time, "Papa." The word carried through the morning air, simple yet powerful. For the soldier, it was not just a name, it was a vow. He would protect them, no matter the cost. For the humans who heard it, it was a reminder of why they endured, why they stood against impossible odds. The outpost was scarred, the soldiers weary, but the fire in their hearts burned brighter than ever. They had faced death, and instead of surrendering, they had chosen to protect, to fight, to remember what it meant to be human. And in doing so, they had found something greater than victory. They had found a reason to keep going.